Hello my dear friends, you're on the Military Summary channel, and this short video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous night of the local time. We have a lot of very interesting details, so let's start. And during the previous night, the Russians conducted another massive drone and missile strike in the western part of Ukraine. As you can see, the Russians were using a significant number of missiles and drones, and as a result of those attacks, lots of energy facilities, objects were damaged or even destroyed. For now, we don't have exact pictures or videos of which objects were damaged or destroyed, but we have the satellite photos, more precisely the satellite information of the fire anomalies. And as for this area, as for the western part of Ukraine, we see that the Russians damaged this energy facility object that Ukrainians are using for transferring electricity and energy from the western part of Ukraine further in the central and the eastern one. And the same objects, the same type of object was damaged or even destroyed in the vicinity of Zaporozhye. So another energy facilities object, this is it, and we see a very heavy fire anomaly exactly in this area. So the Russians continue ruining the Ukrainian energy facilities, energy infrastructure, with the purpose to reduce the Ukrainian possibilities and maybe to force the Ukrainians to begin some strikes due to this situation, because according to information we have, sometimes the Ukrainians have energy and electricity just for 5 days a day. And I can't even imagine what kind of the situation the Ukrainians should expect during the winter period of time. Very interesting update, or maybe funny update, we received from the border with Moldova. According to information we have, up to 47 citizens of Ukraine were captured during the attempts to cross the border between Moldova and Ukraine in attempt to escape the mobilization process. But all of them were captured, and this is already a ready campaign of a company of let's say soldiers that probably would be sent to training centers and then to the line of combat contact. As for the line of combat contact, we have a lot of very interesting details and updates, so let's start. And first let's talk about the western Avdiivka direction. As you can see, we have significant number of geolocations and icons in the vicinity of Ocheretino. So let's start from Sokol. According to pro-Ukrainian mappers Deep State, the Russians established complete control over this stronghold, this one, and also the Russians entered the village by the name of Evgeniivka. So the first buildings were also captured by the Russians, and which means that most likely during the next few days the village of Sokol will be abandoned by the Ukrainians towards the village of Vashod. So the situation here develops in Russian favor. On the other hand, we continue receiving updates of how the Russians were FPV droning the Ukrainian positions further along the railways in direction of Progress. Few more armored vehicles and personal carriers were damaged along this line. As for Novoalexandrovka and the area around, we received some geolocations confirming that the Russians control at least some part of contested area. If you remember, according to different mappers, the Russians captured this part, and this part of, let's say, Ocheretino-Novoalexandrovka-Arkhangelskaya line. But just today, on the 22nd of June, we received first geolocations confirming at least control over this territory. We have two geolocations. In this video, we can see the Russian tank that was attacking the Ukraine positions from a hidden area, and the tank was damaged and then destroyed by Ukraine, probably FPV drone strike or by the Ukrainian anti-tank missile strike. So this video confirms probably the losses of Russian army, not the progress. As for this video, the video was published by the Russian sources. In this video, we can see the movement of Russian tank of 35th Russian Brigade. This is the small tank that were moving along the tree lines. At some point, the tank crossed the tree lines and started moving through the fields in the northern direction. And in the final point, the Russians reached the tree line and began the rotation process. So if we return back on map, the Russians were moving something like this, using this road. They're moving first along this tree line, then they cross the area in the fields in this area, and then they're moving further in the northern direction, and somewhere in this area the Russians finished the landing operation or made a rotation, which confirms the Russian progress over every single tree line around. So significant progress, as you can see, and that means that the Russians are trying to move further, and the next target is Kalinova. Today the Russians published few more videos of FPV drone strikes on Ukraine positions in the southern part of the village. So this is the situation in the western Avdiivka. Now let's move to Toretsk agglomeration, Toretsk, New York area. We have a lot of very interesting updates in this territory. I'll remind you that during the previous few days, we got lots of reports of how the Russians managed to break through the Ukrainian positions and to capture additional territories. After the first few days of clashes, the Russians captured the, let's say, the foothold to the west, in the western direction of Mayorsk. They captured this pump station. The Russians entered the village of Druzhna and Pivnichna and captured this territory. And today, the Ukrainian pro-Ukrainian mappers Deep State reported that the Russians established complete control over the village by the name of Shumy. So this territory was captured by the Russians as the Russians got as close as possible to Toretsk, New York agglomeration. And I'll remind you that according to information we have, that happened due to failed rotation process of armed forces of Ukraine. According to information we have, the Ukrainians redeployed the 24th Mechanized Brigade in direction of Chasiv Yar. And now we have redeployed this brigade as well, 24th Mechanized. But the 24th Mechanized was replaced by 41st Mechanized Brigade that was involved in defense operation of Chasiv Yar. Because 41st was heavily damaged and was, let's say, had significant losses. So that's why the Ukrainians removed 41st Brigade from the line of combat contact to restore its combat capabilities. And during this rotation process, when 41st arrived in Toretsk, the Russians began offensive, and basically the 41st didn't have enough of manpower or forces to slow down the Russians. But this is not the only problem, because the 41st Brigade failed in the vicinity of Toretsk, but as for 24th Brigade, they failed in the vicinity of Chasiv Yar. The thing is that today, after that failed rotation process, after redeployment or changing of these brigades, we received a significant number of updates from the territory that located between Kalinovka and the eastern part of Chasiv Yar, the Black Canal. If you remember, this part of the forest used to be under complete Ukrainian control, according at least to the map and according to most of the mappers. But after that rotation process, we received two updates from two different sources that the Russians managed to clear this territory completely. For example, the forces of 98 Division, who's responsible for offensive operation in this direction, reported that they managed to clear the forest completely between Kalinovka and Chasiv Yar itself. Based on that report, we have adjusted the map and colored this territory as a gray zone. A few hours later, the Russian military expert Rybor reported that the Russians managed to clear just the area, the forest and the industrial zone and the residential area between the railways. These are the railways. And the canal itself. So just this territory was captured. Anyway, for now it's very difficult to understand how many territories the Russians managed to capture, but anyway, as I understand, everything is already under Russian control, starting from Kalinovka to the Chasiv Yar citadel in the eastern part, which is very important progress and very important significant results of the armed forces of Russian Federation. Of course, now the Russians need just to finish the battle for the stronghold, and maybe the Russians will use FAB 3000 for these purposes. And after that, the Russians will start thinking how to cross Seversky Donetsk-Donbass Canal and how to begin the battle for Chasiv Yar itself. Most likely this is going to happen because we see the progress in the south, the progress in Chasiv Yar, and of course there should be some progress, additional progress on the line between Novoalexandrovka, Keramik and Novobakhmutovka. So the Russians will try to encircle the Ukrainians in Toretsk, New York. Now let's move further. We haven't received anything from Siversk as well as nothing from the southern Kupiansk, but we received significant number of updates from Borova direction. According to information we have, is the primary target of the armed forces of Russian Federation in this direction. We have a lot of geolocations confirming that the Russians made significant number of attempts to improve their positions. The Ukrainian sources, more precisely the forces of 3rd Azov Brigade, published the videos of how they were bombing and attacking the offensive Russian forces, sabotage and reconnaissance groups. Most of those attacks, lots of episodes of this video were geolocated by different scene sources and added on map. For example, the artillery strikes of 3rd Azov Brigade took place here, here and here, which indicates additional Russian progress. Also, the strikes were indicated in this area, and on the other hand, we see that the Russians were bombing the Ukrainians as well. We have report that Nadia is under very heavy artillery fire, so most likely the Russians will make attempts attempt to capture this small village between Pershatravnevo and Raigorodka, and we have another, let's say, destroyed howitzer of armored forces of Ukraine in the vicinity of Drozhilubovka. So there are very heavy clashes. The Ukrainians reinforced this area as they could. They sent 67th Brigade, 3rd Azov Brigade. So now we'll see what is going to be next. Now let's move further. We're going to move to northern Kharkiv direction. During the previous 24 hours, we haven't received any changes on the ground. The clashes continues in the northern part of Ovchansk. The Russians continue attacking the Ukrainian positions in the most southern part of the north of Ovchansk, as well as the very heavy clashes were spotted in the area between Tikhe and Volchansk itself. The Ukrainians suffered significant losses, but as you can see, without any changes on the ground. During the previous night, we haven't received any additional video of FAB strike. Maybe the Russians are reloading or try to probably set additional configuration for the equipment they're used for these purposes. And that's it for the short video. Military Summary channel reminds we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel. Put your likes to my Patreon and have a good day. Bye bye.